We are having lesson number 8, and we're going to discuss two subjects. One subject is the mechanical circle of our tendencies, how tendencies, we are born with tendencies, and how those tendencies become stronger and stronger within us, where that can lead in a positive and negative direction. And what we can do in the case that we find that we have tendencies which diminish our happiness, our effectiveness, or our harmony in life. Now, we've already mentioned the causal body. That is, the body in which all of the qualities which we have developed through the series of our incarnations are stored. And we have mentioned that in a particular incarnation, the soul will bring with it into the physical body and into the mind specific tendencies, specific qualities, or what we might call the character of the person, but also talents, abilities, fears, desires. These all go under the category of tendencies. And this creates, in the early years of the childhood, the character in combination with the stimulus that the child receives from the parents. So the child is born with a character, is born with abilities and with talents, with fears, which it has developed in previous lives. And then in the childhood environment, these are increased or decreased according to the behavior of the parents and the family situation. And then we come to a point in our lives where we have to deal consciously with this. Once we become aware that we have a tendency, for example, towards anger, or a tendency towards depression, or a tendency towards fear, or a tendency towards instability, or a tendency to feel that we are victims. So that what can we do about these tendencies which start from deep within us and come to the surface? First of all, let's understand how these tendencies come into manifestation in our lives. Here we have a diagram which is called the mechanical circle of our tendencies. And we see a circle here in which, in the upper level, we have the tendencies which are called samskaras in the Sanskrit terminology, which are the basic seeds which we bring with us into this life. That every being which is born with a certain blueprint. Every cat, every carrot, every dog, every animal, every plant, every human being is born with a certain blueprint, with this tendencies within it. Then, in our mind, these tendencies start to become an inner pressure. We could say that the seed becomes a sprout. In Sanskrit, this is called vritti. The samskara becomes a vritti. The tendency becomes an inner pressure. I begin to feel a pressure towards anger, a pressure towards love, a pressure towards creative expression, a pressure towards joy. So this seed becomes a sprout. It becomes more manifest, but it is still subtle. I mean, it hasn't become yet a thought. It is still something very subtle. It's a feeling. It's not yet a thought. It's a sensation in the mind. Perhaps in meditation, you have experienced this. That is, there are not thoughts, but the mind is not free either. That is, there are some kinds of feelings, sensations, which are not specifically conscious thoughts, but there is a feeling of something there. This is a vritti. When the vritti comes even further up towards manifestation. It's called vasana, which may be similar to the Greek word. It becomes a strong impulse in the mind. It becomes a desire force. Okay, so now I'm beginning to really feel anger. I'm beginning to really feel fear or hurt or depression or love or attraction or repulsion. You see? So the samskara becomes a vritti becomes a vasana. That is, the seed becomes a sprout, the sprout becomes a seedling. It's a greater reality. It's taking up a greater portion of my consciousness. Then if it continues to grow, and it's not something that I can detach myself with, then I become identified with this thought or with this feeling. And so I become anger, I become fear, I become pain, I become depression, I become love, I become peace, depending on the tendency. And this is called klesha. We've already talked about the kleshas, or the identification with a certain state of mind. So now the state of mind has become full. I am in the full identification with this impulse. I am fully identified with my anger, with my fear, with my hurt, with my bitterness, with anything that is there. And then finally, it becomes a karma. That is, it becomes an action. I act on this. I speak with anger. I cry. I go into depression. I become inactive. So then this mental state externalizes itself as some type of behavior, some type of action in our lives. And this action now, this becomes the fruit. That is, the klesha becomes the flower, okay? And the karma is the fruit. This karma creates now, this action creates a new tendency in the causal body. That is, I am further ingrained in anger. I am further ingrained in desire. I am further ingrained in fear. Because I've acted upon this. It has, when it manifests in my life, it becomes once again registered in my causal body. It's something that I'm thinking and doing, and it registers itself again. So this tendency becomes stronger. And then what happens is we get lost in the vicious circle of our tendencies, and we're not able to control them. That is, the sensation comes up, it becomes a thought, it becomes a strong feeling, a strong desire. I identify with it, I act upon it, I express it, and it's registered again in my causal body. And then it's stronger in there, and it comes up again, over and over again. So in many ways, we are like robots which have been programmed, which were programmed before we were even born, and of course programmed in our childhood years. And now these tendencies are controlling our lives. Now, we must also say that there's not only negative tendencies. Compassion is a tendency, love is a tendency, understanding, peace, and also we have in our causal body, we have abilities for music, for creativity, for mathematics, for mechanics, for athletic abilities, healing abilities, counseling abilities, the ability to forgive, the ability to love. So all of these qualities, both what we would consider negative and what we would consider positive, are parts of our causal body and are expressing themselves in our lives. Now, in a particular incarnation, we don't bring all of the contents of our causal body. We bring only a certain portion that we want to work on in that life, and we will bring some things which we need to work on to overcome or improve, such as anger or fear or weakness, whatever it may be. And on the other hand, we will bring with us some tools, some abilities, which will help us learn those lessons. So we will bring some positive and some negative aspects of our being, so as to combine them in this incarnation and work on them. Now, how can we work on dismantling and negative, the negative tendencies that we want to get free from. Let's talk about dismantling this process at every stage of its evolution. Now, concerning the vrittis, the basic way that we can diminish the power of these tendencies, whether they're in the state of the samskara or the vritti, that is the state of the seed or the sprout, is meditation. By meditation, that is by ignoring, not suppressing. There's a great difference between suppressing and ignoring. There's a great difference between saying, this does not exist, and another is to recognize its existence, but to choose to direct our awareness at our chosen object of consciousness. It's one thing to say, I have no anger, and another thing to say, I prefer to focus on love. Anger is there, bitterness is there, hurt is there, but I am meditating at this point on the light, on the divine, and so meditation is a process in which we starve the mind of these mental toxins. It's a purification process. It's just as fasting, meditation is a fasting for the mind. Just as fasting is a fasting for the body, that is, we don't put in the body toxins which disturb it. Meditation is a type of fasting for the mind. We deny the mind its usual mental processes. And that allows the mind, that allows two things to happen. First of all, the particular habit of thinking in this way becomes diminished. It's lessened. And secondly, we develop the power of the witness. So I become the witness of the vritti of hurt or anger or bitterness or fear. So I'm realizing that I am not this. This is a mental tendency which was developed either in previous lives or in this life, but I am not this. This is a mechanism of my mind. So on the one hand, we are weakening the tendency, and on the other hand, we are developing the power and the strength of the witness. Now there's one mistake that we should not make here, and that is we should not fight tendencies. Because when we fight them, we strengthen them. Because when you fight something, you give attention to it. And whatever you give attention to, you increase. So it's very important not to fight with my fear or fight with my anger or fight with anything. We accept it, we acknowledge its presence, but then we direct our attention elsewhere. Of course, there's another process, which is the opposite of meditation in this case, and that is catharsis, in which, rather than ignore it, I immerse myself in it, and I allow myself to be totally identified with this, and to go through a catharsis situation in which I release it by hitting a pillow or crying or going through some kind of bodily or verbal kind of expression. Now, these are not exclusive, meditation and catharsis. And often meditation brings catharsis, and often catharsis brings us to meditation. Now, many meditation schools do not teach about catharsis, and they don't teach about analysis, which to me, it's pretty dangerous, because the modern person is not living the peaceful and protected life that those who created meditation thousands of years ago were living. It's one thing to meditate when you're living in an ashram, in a monastery, probably not married, probably not having many responsibilities in the physical world, and thus not being the reciprocant of all kinds of negative energies. And of course, in a different era than where we're living now, in which if you just turn on the TV, you're going to be confronted with all kinds of violence, whether it's fantasy or whether it's actually the news.